government bad?
Let's talk about it. Even if you're a mid-level news consumer, chances are you've heard about all of the cuts to the federal government. The housing department, slashed in half. Those space guys, decimated, all in the name of saving your taxpayer dollars.
Finally, with all this saved money, I could buy a house.
Do these cuts matter? Should we be talking about it? And what's the real reason behind all of this? The haters say it's too challenging to discuss government efficiency, so we're gonna do it while playing one of the hardest arcade games.
Because I'm psycho.
Watch out. National Archives, you're next. DoDonPachi, a vertically scrolling shooting game released in 1997. If you're familiar with Space Invaders or Galaga, think of those as its predecessors. Although it's not terribly well known in the West, it was a massively influential step forward for the genre and helped launch its developer, Cave, into the preeminent bullet hell studio for the 15 years that followed. Alrighty folks, welcome. We're gonna just jump right into it, setting the stage a little bit about why this is part of the public discourse in the first place. I think my sense is that it's because people are unhappy with government generally. Like, that shouldn't be a surprise. It's seen as slow and maybe overly bureaucratic, just not meeting the needs of the people. And that sucks, right? Because people don't want to hear that government can't do a thing because of rules. They want to hear that it is actually improving their everyday life. And so when a politician comes around and speaks to that frustration, it is very, very refreshing, right? Because something about the system must be broken with how incredibly difficult it is to build wealth in this country, how hard it is to buy a house or achieve higher education without being in some form of debt for the rest of your life. So it should be a good thing that someone is recognizing that something is wrong and wants to fix it. So we as a country elected these individuals who appear to be very wealthy and successful businessmen, and they're going to fix the system. Color me a little bit skeptical, though. There seems to be already some form of a disconnect because we've started getting a sense of what the solutions are going to be, and they don't necessarily seem to line up with the problems that most folks are facing. I'm basing this off of not only my own personal life experiences, but also I just spent half a day talking to a bunch of folks for whom the system is like really broken, like could not be more broken. I was helping with this thing called the point in time count. And basically a bunch of folks go out on the streets and talk to every single person experiencing homelessness. Now, if you're a watch the local evening news level of consumer, maybe you've heard of it.
There I am, Gary, there I am.
And it's uncomfortable, it's freezing cold, usually starts before the sun comes up, but it's always this extremely memorable day where you learn a lot about the issues that real people faced, not just what some talking lizard head in a suit say people face on TV. And big shocker, No one that I spoke to said they got evicted because the government was too woke. No one said that uh, they couldn't afford groceries because of DEI. And so it makes you think, and hey, wait a second. What do these billionaires know about a broken system? Clearly it worked pretty well for them, right? Look how happy they are. And so during this count, you really do kind of hear it all, right? Folks sometimes want to share their stories, what landed them living on the street, and turns out a lot of things can get you there. One guy I was talking to, he had a manual labor job, but then he got in a car accident or had some injury, which meant he couldn't work anymore. And so he lost his job just as he was going to get surgery, which landed him in medical debt, and then losing his house wasn't too far after that. Another guy I talked to, senior citizen, he still had to work. He was 70 years old. Him and his wife both had jobs in order to afford a place to stay, and then his wife died. He couldn't afford the rent on his own as a single income, so now this guy is not only dealing with the tragedy of losing his wife, but also is experiencing homelessness for the first time at 70 years old, which is crazy and tragic, right? These aren't like meth head criminals. These are just normal people who are struggling because life is hard. Turns out that, you know, it's really easy to fall into homelessness, and it's super hard to get out of it, because once you have an eviction on your record, not as many people are going to want to rent to you. It's harder to even find a place. Even if you do have a job, which a lot of folks do, it's hard to get reliable transportation there. It's hard to do anything when you don't have a stable place to sleep every night. So that's why there are these, government programs and nonprofits that have rental assistance or case management, other things to help folks stay on their feet. But there's definitely nowhere near enough to go around. More people are struggling with this kind of thing than there are resources to fix it. So here's the first test for our billionaires. How fix? Got a broken system right in front of us. What are we going to do about it? Well, the richest man on the planet alleges that actually homeless service providers are intentionally trying to make more people homeless so that they can get more money, which is absurd. It is absurd. How do you even respond to that? If I've heard anything about going to school for social work, it's like the first thing they tell you there is, don't expect to be in this field for the money. Chances are you'll probably be, at best, poor adjacent for your whole life. And if you wanted to do it for the money, you probably would have, done a finance business something or other, right? Most people would do this work because they want to help their community or want to help people in need, vulnerable people who could use the help. So you have these government programs or, nonprofits too, that try and stabilize folks. so they can end their homelessness. And this is stuff like rental assistance, it's case management, job, workforce training, stuff like that. The problem is there isn't enough of those programs to meet the current need, right? More people are asking for assistance than there is assistance to give, and that's really tricky. It's not good. Like, the problem comes when these programs aren't inherently going to end homelessness entirely, right? They are helping folks who need it now, but it is not proactive. And this isn't to talk down on the programs at all. No, they are insanely necessary given the current situation to keep going and fund and have available for people, because people need assistance with rent. It is expensive. And yeah, if you're Elon Musk, then you just say that all of these folks that you see living on the street are not deserving of help because they are just drug zombies. Chances are it's like your neighbor. You know? It's someone who might have lived right next door to you, same apartment complex, and the landlord increased the rent and they couldn't afford it because they didn't get a raise at work. And so what are they supposed to do other than sleep on the street? So, a little tricky. And if you noticed, we also lost our first life not too long ago, which is a sign of what's to come. This game does get very hard, and this is where I start doing very poorly. So I might need to come back and practice. I don't know yet. We're on to stage 4. Okay, this is where we get into the real shit, both in the game and with the discussion, I guess. I want you to imagine that you are a billionaire. Okay, you are a billionaire and you really like all of your money, all the money you might have earned from, I don't know what you did. Maybe you didn't pay your workers a living wage and that was really profitable. Who do you think is going to be the biggest threat to that money? I'd say probably the government, right? Like the government can increase the income tax that you owe. The government can, bring forth new regulations to keep your workers safe, even if that comes at a bit of a cost to you. And they might even pry their nosy little noses into your offshore Cayman Islands bank account, right? I don't know. So it would be really nice in this situation with you as the billionaire if the government were a little understaffed or under-resourced, right? Fewer people to have eyes on you, less oversight in general. Sounds pretty nice. Damn. Oh. That's okay. We're gonna push through. No! Okay, we're not gonna push through. I'm going to practice a little bit off camera, and I'll record again tomorrow. So I'll see you there. And it was in these isolated moments, mesmerized by the barrage of intricate bullet patterns, it all just clicked. It was clear they represented something more. Danger from every direction. Barely any time between stages to catch your breath. And occasional support, if you play perfectly. Limitations with data collection will always underrepresent the true number, but we know there are more than 750,000 people in America experiencing homelessness. Already likely to be dealing with previous traumas, they're now confronted with the challenge of weaving through eligibility requirements for assistance spread across dozens of different agencies. If they're lucky and survive years of wait lists. Assistance that certainly won't be enough to be a long-term solution, though it is often the difference needed to stay afloat. Meanwhile, the richest man in the world is trying to prevent any of that assistance from coming in order to enrich himself. He's saying it's actually not that hard to beat the game, though it's much easier to assert that when you have infinite lives, or are paying someone to play the game for you. He looks at a broken system and says, actually,
this homeless man won't leave, so I'm spraying him with dirty brown water.
There are no problems, so there's nothing to fix. How fucking lazy. All right, folks, we are back. Stage 4, got 4 lives, so feeling pretty good about that. And honestly, my goal is to finish this stage with all of those lives intact, which I think is totally feasible, especially because I feel pretty confident that I figured out what I was doing wrong before. That is that I've not been using my bombs very effectively. Do you see in the bottom left corner of the screen, you have these limited resources, the bees, the letter B, not these actual glowing bees that show up. It sort of acts like a, panic button, get out of jail free card for whenever there's just like way too much shit flying around the screen. And they reset every time you die, which means there's really no excuse to just use them whenever things are getting a little dicey. You could say, perhaps a strategy for this game, take it right out of Americans' foreign policy playbook. Bomb everything, baby. Heyo. You guys like that one? Like that joke? More where that... Damn it. More where that came from. Okay. So we were talking about kneecapping the federal government earlier, or attempts to kneecap it. And it occurred to me that these sort of strategies have been under development very publicly for many years now. Do you remember when the Secretary of Agriculture got super excited one day because he finally figured out how to make federal employees quit? He just told everyone they needed to move to Kansas City or else they would be fired. And he was like, yeah, we did it. We figured out the trick. But, they would probably quit instead of move because their family and friends live where they work, sir. So now folks are getting much more overt with these attempts with, just like the random sort of mass layoffs or those emails where you just reply with the word resign and they'll take care of the rest for you. How badly do they want dysfunction to occur? How badly do they want this, right? To to offer buyouts for staff to quit. There must be a pretty good return on that investment, don't you think? I don't know. It's just not. It's not. I promise this will be the last time I bring up the point in time count, but the very night before we did it is when the news dropped that there was just this massive federal funding freeze where all programs and grants funded by the federal government were just paused or stopped indefinitely and caused a lot of confusion and fear, naturally. So, as we were all out on the streets talking to these folks, the thought crosses your mind like, are thousands more people going to lose the rental assistance that comes from the federal government and then end up on the street as well? Are all of those people who finally made progress and got into stable housing just going to have it disappear instantly? It's not good. Certainly not for the recipients of such support, but also for employees of the government too, right? Because now, instead of setting out actual fires of your day-to-day work, trying to make sure that people are stable, you're instead figuring out how to make these programs work without that stable source of funding. And so you're just setting out a made-up fire. Now, that doesn't need to be that way. And it's very disheartening. You have folks who don't even want to do their jobs anymore because they don't know if it's going to be a reasonable option to pursue. And it's like, if everyone is in this position where they're not actually able to do their jobs, is that efficient government? Isn't that what the point was? Clearly not. Clearly it wasn't the point. So what's the point exactly? I find myself asking that question more and more frequently because, if it's not actually about efficient government, which sure doesn't appear to be, what's the rush in firing as many people as possible as quickly as possible? The other thing you'll hear is like, well, it's reducing waste and putting more of your taxpayer dollars in your pocket, and cool, like I can get behind that one. It's kind of weird, I guess, because we already sort of have programs like that, like rental assistance, that could just be, made available to more people. But okay, what do you got? What ideas? How are you gonna do it? Last I heard, there's a plan to give 20% of the savings back to taxpayers, and why 20? Why not all of it? Isn't the whole point to go back to the taxpayers? I'm so confused as to what is actually being accomplished here, or what the intent is. And the last argument I'll bring up is this idea that we need less government, and that's honestly not that satisfying to me either, because like it or not, we do kind of need government in some areas. It has a vastly different set of tools than this is going poorly. I'm proud of how far we've come, gang, but I don't know if I can do this one. We'll keep pushing through. So, listen, government has different tools than the free market does. You can't solve everything with free market capitalism. And so that's where the government comes in. And that's why we have, bird flu researchers on staff with the government, because it's not necessarily profitable for the free market to pay for those positions, right? Think of, like housing as another area where it doesn't work, right? Like, at least it isn't working right now. All of your typical laws of supply and demand aren't providing people with the ability to rent an apartment or buy a house. And so that's theoretically where the government could step into. And truth be told, when it wants to, the government can kind of fucking rock. There are a lot of really cool things it can do that actually benefit the people in huge, meaningful ways. And for that, let's have a brief history intermission. Do you remember the Gilded Age? Like maybe from high school or something? In late 1800s and early 1900s America, it really was the best of times and the worst of times. We're talking post-industrialization, so there's new technology like railroads and the telegraph, and just insane progress all over. Of course, there were also factories pumping lead in the sky, and workers were doing 15 hours a day because despite all of the country's growth, the rewards weren't being reaped by those working in such dangerous conditions. No, no, no. They could hardly afford to live in cramped tenements. It of course all flowed back to the robber barons exploiting them. Cornelius Vanderbilt, J.P. Morgan, Henry Ford, and so on. They held all of the wealth, all the infrastructure, and the power that comes with it. So, how did the small, everyday person fight back when it seemed so futile? It was a collective effort. Journalists raising awareness of harmful practices. All types of everyday people, including the middle class, recognized that their brothers and sisters' suffering because of this greed was devastating for the community. What gave a mere few the right to act as gods at the expense of all others? And then came Teddy, the rule breaker, the fighter. Someone who loved his fellow countrymen and wasn't going to sit idly by because his efforts on the working man's behalf stretched the limit of his authority. He declared the Constitution was made for the people, and not the people for the Constitution. This wealth disparity crisis needed its Rough Riding champion. So then came workers' rights, mothers' pensions, food safety, limiting corporate power with antitrust. All of these actions made a tangible impact on daily life. That's what effective government is, and still can be. We must recognize that these efforts need to be proactive and ongoing. Exploiters will find new ways to exploit, and since the 1970s, inequality skyrocketed just as it had 100 years prior. COVID-19 accelerated it further, and the government is nowhere to be seen. In its place, billionaires, cosplaying to steal from the poor and give to the rich.
It is thanks to you that the future of civilization is assured.
Okay, last stage. no extra lives. This is the last one. Truly could not be higher stakes than this. And we're also reaching the end of our discussion too, so I'm sure the question that's on your mind is, where do we go from here? What do we even do? First suggestion, probably stop giving billionaires more power. They have enough of that. Let's share it with the rest of America. Also, I'd love to ask the media to stop sort of portraying this topic as a challenge or something. And it seems like, you always hear about, oh, well, they promised to do 50 billion, but they've only done 7 billion. It's like, do you want them to keep going? Because that's what it seems like. Yeah, and I don't know. Just try and ask questions to your elected officials, hold them accountable. I'm just a guy playing a video game. I don't know what to do. We're doing actually exceedingly well. We might be able to pull this off if we don't need any more bombs at all. Wait, oh my god. I got an extra life at 20 million. Oh, okay, we could actually do this. Sorry, this discussion has been fun, but I need to lock in. We did it. We actually... Wow. Wow. This is a momentous day, truly. Nothing but a praise will come to my lips. You know what? Nothing but a praise will come to my lips to you for listening. Hey, if you've been affected by any of what's been going on, whether you're housing insecure or laid off, I'm really sorry. You don't deserve this, and please continue sharing your stories, and we'll get through this.